because we're always all dependent. We're breathing the same air, we're walking on the same earth, we're drinking the same water. And so then the question isn't whether or not we're dependent. The question is, how are we dependent? So if we're living in scarcity and lack, it's codependence. If we're living in love and abundance, it's interdependence.
That was Quanita Roberson, and this is episode 58.
Welcome to the Brave Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Lynn, founder of Sistership Circle and author of Open Your Heart and The Art of Leading Circle. I'm the mother of 2 girls, an 8 on the Enneagram, aka the Challenger, happily married to my business partner, Brent, love connecting with nature, and have put in well over 10,000 hours circling with other women. On this podcast, we will explore how to embody the brave woman so that you can take action on your dreams and desires, unapologetically speak your truth, and live life on your own terms. Grab a seat and a cup of tea, and let's get started. Welcome, Quanita. I am so excited for this conversation today on healing the mother wound. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. And I'd love to start with your story, because I think that obviously this conversation is rooted in the fact that you were born to 2 parents when they were 15, when your mom was 15 years old having you.
Yes.
So yeah, let's
Both
just
my parents
start with that.
Both my parents were 15 going on 16 at that time. And so, I think that part of what my story is embedded in is, being an African-American woman. My mother, one of the stories that she wrote about that I actually have in her handwriting was about when she found out that her parents knew she was pregnant with me. And she was coming back home from my dad's house, and she was riding with my grandfather, who was the pastor of a holiness church, by the way. And so she didn't know if he knew yet. Her sister had found out, and she suspected her sister had told her parents, but she wasn't sure. He didn't talk. He didn't say anything the whole ride home, which isn't unusual for my grandfather, or wasn't at that time. And they get to the house, and she said she didn't realize until she walked in the door and saw all of the family sitting at the dining room table that this wasn't an individual journey, it was a communal one. And so one of the things that I often will speak is that from before I was born, I was steeped in community. And so this piece about mothering, my mothering was never just from my mother, I went home from the hospital to my grandparents' house because my mother was 15. Right. And it was very communal. My aunts, there were people who always lived in that house that wasn't just my grandparents. And so I grew up in this very communal way. And that doesn't mean that it takes away mother wounding because there's a stepping away from the mother that has to happen in all of our growth and development. Now, that doesn't matter whether it's a community mama or your birth mother. That process still has to happen. And there can be the mother wound with community women who step up to mother us, as well as our birth mothers who step up to mother us. Yeah.
Oh, growing up communal. So how did that feel?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love, one of the things I'm actually working on a book called Birthed by Many Mothers. And it came out of this whole piece where Sabang Some, West Africa, Burkina Faso, one of the things that she has said or told this story about before she transitioned out of this world was that she was 7 years old, about 7 years old, before she realized that she was birthed from one woman, because all of the women in the village took care of all of the kids. And she said it was really quite confusing to her. And I write about how it's just the opposite in the West. Like, I think I was 30 before I realized that I was birthed by many mothers, because our culture tells us so much we're supposed to get all of this from this one woman that is impossible for anybody to fulfill.
Oof.
And so this community piece was that, I lived in a neighborhood where my grandfather was the oldest of 17. And he had nine. My mother had 8 siblings, so there was 9 children in their family, and most of my aunts and uncles lived in the neighborhood. So I could ride my bike to my aunts and uncle's house. My great aunt lived in the neighborhood, so I could ride my bike to her house and help, her clean her house, and she'd pay me some money, right? And so there was this very communal kind of existence. And of course, it's different then than it is now about riding our bikes. We used to ride our bike. We used to go outside, and your parents would just say, "Come home when the street lights came on," right?
Right.
I was talking about this recently with a friend about how, oh my goodness, I can't remember. I can't believe how far we would go away from home too. And it just, that our parents didn't know we didn't have cell phones during that time.
Nope.
But you could go to somebody's house and just call and check in here or there. But, it was a very different time. And so there was freedom in that. And so it was freedom to be with larger community, whether that was my family or also there were community mamas that were along the way. So there was a woman who was down the street from my house when I was walking home from school that I would always stop and talk to. Or there was another woman who I would go rake her leaves, who lived a couple blocks away. And so there was this connection with the women around us. And I've often asked the question, like, what have we lost as a community when we've lost our mothering? Because, there came a time where a lot of those mothers these days are at work. They have to work. So you don't have the communal mothers that are just kind of sitting on the porch watching the kids walk home from school, Yeah.
Yeah, that brings up so much for me. Just this deep craving I have for that. And also being raised that way as well, with just seeing we were just talking about my friend just put her kids, she moved away and she came back and she just put her kids in the school, the elementary school that we went to, and how the kids are actually being dropped off down the street because the school's overcrowded and they're all walking up the path. And I just had this burst of memories of all of us kids in the neighborhood being out till dark and on that path. And I could just see it so clearly. And now having a conversation with a mom, how, the kids just don't go out anymore. And like, even thinking about my own kids of like, yes, go next door to the little girl across the street, like, yes, get out. But there's like this control and this fear around our kids even going out to play. That's just.
Yeah. There's this wonderful book I read years ago called Perfect Madness, Mothering in the Age of Anxiety. And I love this. It's a woman who lived in France and had children there and then came back to the US and had children here and wrote about kind of the difference for her. And one of the things she talks about, I'm 52. So think about mothers that around my age or a little bit younger, a little bit older. And she writes how we weren't raised to be mothers. We were raised to be businesswomen. So what we tend to do is manage our children instead of mother them. And so that question of what have we lost when we lost our mothering? So, even in our education system, it's filled with these women who have been raised to manage children instead of mother. And so, that's why we have the soccer moms. It's the managing and all these different things, right? It's the managing of our children. That's why, I remember one year our school does, they have these homework packets they give you for the summer for the kids and stuff. And I remember it was the year that I was getting divorced. And my son's one of those kids that he just does that. I mean, so he finished his, my daughter hadn't touched hers. And she really needed the summer off, And I remember sending her back to school with a note that said, basically, you have her during the school year, during the summer, she's mine. She didn't do any of this. If you have an issue, give me a call. And it's that piece around like me being clear. And I always told my kids, parents trump teachers. And I'm clear like that. Nope, that's not what she needed. And, how have we keep spilling it over more and more and more, my kids, because we didn't have, we have some neighborhood kids, but our schools, but my kids went to, in Cincinnati, we have public Montessori, and even public Montessori high school. And so my kids were blessed to go there, but it wasn't their neighborhood school. And so they would take the bus they liked taking the bus. I would take them a couple times a week, but they insisted they wanted to be with their friends. And, but that meant they were like the first in the morning to get on the bus and the last in the evening to get off. So even without extracurricular, they're already getting up really late, or early, and then having to stay up really late to finish their work. And so it's like, I told them they could be in one thing. You can't have more than that because you need time, downtime. We've lost our understanding of rest and our understanding of just the gentleness and care, time and space in between.
Mm. It's interesting that you say that because that's what I felt for my kids this summer.
Yeah.
And I didn't put them in any camps. And it's been very much do a lot of nothing for the past couple months. And what my one daughter loves gymnastics. So it's been like, hey, you want to go to gymnastics tomorrow? Yeah. Or no, right? And it's felt really so good for our nervous systems to not be doing and to
Yeah.
just really, and now I've been doing a lot. I've been really busy. I've been on this computer way too much this
Yeah.
summer, but just giving them that freedom, I think I'm just so glad that you mentioned that because we are managing them and we're managing them to a T and we're
Yes.
trying to keep them busy when actually they just need to be kids and just
Yeah.
play and
Yeah. And listen to their hearts, right? Like there was one summer I know with Michaela, my daughter. I spent the whole summer, most of the summer, like on the couch with her watching. She loves the show The Office. It's not one of my favorite ones, but she loves that show. She probably watched it, the series 7 times. But that summer, I was committed to sitting and watching the whole season or series with her. And the reason I is because I knew in the in-between spaces, there was conversations that we would have that we never would have had otherwise. You need the downtime. You need some boredom for the juice to surface, right?
for the creativity.
Yeah.
Yes, we need to be bored for creativity to come through. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes. Our line in our family where our kids are growing up is boredom is an insult to the mind. And so, this piece about if our kids came to us and told us that, like, we have there's outside, we have all kinds of art stuff in our house. We've always had that, and so, and our kids gratefully are research kind of kids. And so, like, they'll look up anything on YouTube to teach themselves and to find out what they're curious about. I think Montessori education really instilled that in them.
This episode is sponsored by Jamie Wiggins, womb medicine woman, mother, poet, and coach. You can find her at jamiewiggins.org. Click the link in the show notes. And now enjoy a beautiful poem during this short break.
Down we go, open to the great unwinding. Release your bindings. Do you hear the rumbling? It's a wordless place. It's the crusted ways. They are crumbling. Let them sink, slink, crash and slide through your lips. Let them drip. The swallowed moments of trying so hard only not to measure up. The not enoughs. Shapes you were not meant to mold to. Contracts that no longer hold you. Hear the letters flutter free. The words escape. Silence now in open space. Let the paper rip. How I still wish my tummy tucked a little tighter, even when my womb cries for more space. We are expanding, she says. Revere me. Let the old ways slip. They are keeping us from sleep, from intimacy, keeping hearts from knowing the making of the grit. Red silken clay that vibrates, melodious birdsong and knees on earth kind of screams, moans of ecstasy, dark, dark chocolate. Sing it, praise it, rage it. All I ask is that you live it. It will slide through your lips without trying. The flow, it has its own knowing. There is a freedom in giving out, breathing in, breathing out. Safety is not what you think. It's all right to tremble. Of course you will cling. Of course we will stumble. No more thinking, only being. Stay with it, as the ancestors sing. Hold steady, dear one. This is a great remembering.
So I want to go back to what you said at the beginning, circling back to we need to separate from our mothers, whether that's our birth mother or our community mama.
Yes.
What does that mean? And that's really where you kind of sit around the mother wound.
Yes.
And so let's talk a little bit about what that means.
Yeah. I
Inspiration.
really think it's the process of growing up. We all come into this world with the child archetype, which has us have authority outside of ourselves. So we can start learning some patterns and some boundaries and some ways of moving through the world. But part of the child archetype is that it helps grow us, like the three different stages. First, it's the innocence, the naive innocence that comes with the child archetype. But then for the child archetype to develop and grow, there has to be an innocence betrayed. And I think that's the mother wound. And then from the innocence betrayed, the growth of the archetype goes then to a renewed innocence with discernment. And so we move from being childish to growing to childlike. And I think that in this culture that tends to be such an adolescent adult culture, we're just stuck as uninitiated adults. And what initiation asks of us is that we move from being earth-centered and led in our decision making to being spirit-centered and led in our decision making. Now, it doesn't mean we ignore our earthly needs. It just doesn't lead our choices. And, a lot of people know that idea in the form of like Vision Quest. Vision Quest asks that of us, that we be spirit led in our decision making during that time and not this earthly kind of journey, right? And so growing up into our full, what I would say, grown ass selves requires us to move. And I think if we think of the heart, if we think of the chakra system, the upper part of the heart chakra and the upper chakras is that spirit led place. Yeah.
Woo! That one's so good. Yeah. Wait, let's just like soak that in for a second. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say it's good, but it's not easy, right? Like I think like that's why I think in some ways we avoid it. It's like we know our yes to the journey will require things of us.
Yeah.
And this culture gives us so much opportunity, I guess, so many opportunities to look outside of ourselves instead of inside of ourselves. And in some ways it's like it's so tricky. It's this trickster medicine too, right? It can look like we're standing up for ourselves and in the process really be abandoning ourselves in the process because we're giving somebody else our power.
Yeah.
I was with a group hosting conversations and this one woman said something to me about like I said something and she felt triggered by me. And my response to her was in that moment was that was not my intent. And let's give each other some grace, you know? Because, and I didn't say this to her, but one of the things I know is a trigger by definition is rooted in your past, not in the present moment. And so it's like she can be telling me, and that's good information, but it's really hers to clean up and not mine. But we've been using that as in it's the other person's to clean up outside of ourselves instead of ours to take on.
I want to go back to the initiation.
Yeah.
Because when we think about past tribal living, communal living, right? And we had rites of passages into adulthood that had vision quest type of qualities to it. And now we don't, and so that being stuck in kind of this adolescent adult mindset today.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for us in our culture to start creating those rites of passages or those, how do we have that initiation? I mean, I know my answer, but I want to hear from you. How do we create those initiations from earth to spirit-based decision-making?
Yeah. So first I will say I've been very blessed to have some amazing elders show up in my life. I started my healing journey at 15 and they showed up when I was ready for them is what I'll say. And a diverse group of elders, which I'm very grateful for. one of the things with that is I always say that I think in growing elders, for me, stepping into my own elderhood has been so much informed by being eldered well myself and
Mm.
being able to witness my elders walk through life. And so one of the things I started in 2019, I originally started it with Tennyson Wolf, who was my partner and co-creator of a leadership rites of passage cohort for adults. It's called Fire and Water, and it's a 16-month journey. And in the 16 months, there's 3 5-day retreats. It's the heroine's journey in a lot of ways, but the whole purpose is, how do you meet yourself? First of all, the idea of coming together and retreat for 5 days at a time is because, one of the things I heard Martin Shaw once say is that being out in nature, it takes at least 3 days deep before you really get the medicine. So it needed to be more than 3 days. And this journey, the journey, even though we each have to walk our own alone, we can do it side by side. We can do it in community, and we need community to hold us in that space. And so this is like, the whole idea is we have lots of leaders in the world, because leadership just means people are following you. It says nothing about where you're taking them. But to develop wise leaders, I felt like required initiation. And that takes time. It's a journey. It's not an event. And so we go through this journey together. And the first retreat, I always say, is focused on the preparation for the journey. It's connection to the land, connection to the self, connection to spirit, connection to each other. The second retreat is you're in the middle of the journey. And I refer to it as the medicine retreat. What's the medicine you have for the world right now? What's the medicine that you need? And the third retreat is the return. And so we do what we call a presentation of learning. It's not what have you done in the 16 months, it's what did you learn? And we get to witness and be witnessed by each other. Mm. And this journey just has been so transformative for people. We have about 50 alum. We've done 3 cohorts. I just opened up the application process for the 4th cohort, which will start in February. And I've just watched these people go through this journey together and come out, number one, wanting more. And second is staying connected with each other. So our first Fire and Water cohort, which ended in November of 2020, which we were in the thick of it. So 2 of our retreats we had to do online, 5-day retreats online. And then, and one of the things I'm so glad to speak is that out of those 3 small groups, all 3 are still meeting. And not only that, one of the small groups made a commitment to each other to go from 16 months together to 16 years. So they're meeting once a month, and they're doing this on their own. And one of the conversations they had, which I loved, is they asked each other, are we friends? And what they came up with is, no, we're not friends. We're people who have agreed to witness and be witnessed by each other this lifetime. Yeah. And that's the growing up, right? Yeah.
I mean, so first of all, like, anyone listening can go on the journey with you, but you also just really provided a framework.
Yeah.
What I really heard is it's truly about consciously going through your own heroine's journey.
Yes.
For women, right? Or hero's journey.
Yes.
For men.
Yes. Well, and one of the things I will say about that journey is that we so think we can do this by ourselves, and we can't, because we're all afraid we'll drown in the grief. And so unless you have somebody that you trust to hold space for you, you won't go all the way to the bottom of the wound to get access to the gift that's on the other side of it. So we have people who'll dive in and they'll go really deep, but they're trying to hold themselves, and then they have to come back up. There's a thing that Bill Plotkin in his book Soulcraft, he talks about the ascending journey to spirit, where the collective we is a masculine journey. It's why we have more ministers and priests that are men than women. And the descending journey to soul is a feminine journey. It's why we have more witches than warlocks. And one of the things that I woke up one day and really got, oh my gosh, like the spiritual walk, the collective we is held by the masculine, and the individual I is held by the feminine. But the earthly walk, the collective we is held by the feminine, and the individual I is held by the masculine. And it's how we actually get balance of masculine and feminine in heaven and earth. So our divine self and our human self.
Okay, so we were talking a little bit about spiral dynamics.
Yes.
And I've done a lot of work in that. And the gift of the feminine, you say
Yeah.
it's the gift of the feminine in conscious development. I think this is a good time for us to dive into this. And so, yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And also for you to kind of explain spiral dynamics for someone who doesn't understand
Yes.
the concept. Yeah.
Yes. So spiral dynamics is a framework and people have used it for like moral development. I like looking at it as a consciousness development um, theme and kind of layers. And so what it says is that we started a basic value meme, and it starts at beige, which is just basic food, water, shelter, basic needs. And then it Don Beck's spiral anyway, and then it goes to purple, which is the tribal, and then it goes to red, which is the kind of like it's like Robin Hood, it's kind of my way or the highway kind of energetic. And then blue, which it tends to be more of authority outside of self. So it's like churches are very blue, gangs are very blue, policemen are very blue. Blue has like there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. There's tradition and roles and responsibilities. So oftentimes when people are creating a program like to get gang members out of gangs, they'll just change the unhealthy blue to a healthier blue. So they'll do like a basketball team, which still has authority outside of self, which has the right way and wrong way to do things, all of those kind of things, roles and responsibilities. And then from blue, you get orange, which is orange is like the acquiring of stuff. It's like data for data's sake. So higher education is very orange. We want to acquire more and more data. Our consumer culture is very orange. If you look at blue to orange, it's like where science separated from the church. It's that gathering more and more. And then after orange, you go into green, and green is where all the isms are. I would say it's collaboration, it's consciousness, it's circle work. A lot of times people can get stuck in the green and kind of go in circles because it still holds, even though it seems like it's full of love, it actually still has this fear energy of not enough. And one of the things Don Beck says is the biggest leap in consciousness is from green to yellow. And yellow is the first level that's the integrated level. And it's the first level where there's an understanding that the journey is transcend and include. So you need all of those. You can't skip a layer, right? And so it actually, if you think about initiation, I think initiation happens in the middle of the heart chakra. And I think that leap from green to yellow is that leap from the bottom part of the heart chakra, which is rooted in the earth, to the upper part of the heart chakra is rooted in the heavens. And often I've heard people say that the spiral doesn't align with the chakra system. And I think this is what the feminine has to offer to it. Because if I added a value meme at the bottom and I call it black. And the black value meme is before we're born. There's consciousness before birth. With Don Beck's spiral, he says that growth and development, if you start at beige, is individual, collective, individual, collective, individual, collective, which means that consciousness shows up in an individual way and we kind of tap into it when we're ready. And then there becomes enough critical mass that like leaps us to the next layer because you have this journey, not only individually, but communally as well. I think that what the feminine has to offer to the spiral is this black value meme that's before beige, because then it changes the whole system. Then it's like growth and development happens collective, individual, collective, individual, collective, individual. So something shows up collectively on the planet first. And then we each tap into it when we're ready. And of course, just like when we make a choice and we make a groove in the universe, which makes it easier for the next person and the next person. So it does make it faster for other people to come along once, we have more people who have trailed that path. But what I think that the black gives to us is this sense of we come from a place of belonging. And if we really understood that we were birthed out of belonging and we return there, I think it would change everything. I think one of our deepest needs is this piece of belonging. And if we knew that we could not belong because we come already belonging, I think that's the gift the feminine has for the spiral and for consciousness development.
I'm getting teary. Thank you for that. Just had a call this morning about connection and how we're just all looking for connection, but sometimes the way in which we're asking for connection doesn't feel good for the other person. But ultimately, that's what it all comes down to, is we're all just seeking this connection. And that's really where we are in the world. And I can see this on like a macro and a micro level of how this is impacting me and the collective. And so it's like this call is such medicine in this moment for me, and hearing you, and just right where I am in this moment, it's like how we call these things in for ourselves, for our healing. And yeah, I'm just feeling really soaking it in. Let's just put it that way, soaking it in. So if you're listening right now with me, I hope that you're also soaking this in and really getting this piece around belonging. One of the things that you stand for is the myth of independence.
Yeah.
Let's go there.
So the myth of independence, I think that and the idea of independence is actually a trauma response, because we're always all dependent. We're breathing the same air, we're walking on the same earth, we're drinking the same water. And so then the question isn't whether or not we're dependent. The question is, how are we dependent? So if we're living in scarcity and lack, it's codependence. If we're living in love and abundance, it's interdependence. And of course, that can move in and out in a whole sentence, right? Like we can start off with somebody and be very interdependent, and then move into our codependent space because we get triggered in a moment around something that's not healed in us, right? But this myth of independence, another way I think that shows up is this piece around, I do a lot of ancestral work, like in our, personally and with the fire and water people. And my mother, when my mother died, I was my mother's only child. And so we were very enmeshed. And one of the things that I remember, when I was 16, first of all, I went to court and pressed charges against my stepfather for sexual abuse. And my mother was still married to him. She was still married to him when she died. And I remember going and picking the day I was going to pick up her ashes. And I was still sitting in this grief of feeling like she chose him over me. Mm-hmm. And what I got that morning was, oh no, that's not true. That she chose him over her, because I am her. I am my mother. She chose him over her. She couldn't even see me, because unhealed survivors it's about survival. I wasn't even a part of the equation for her. She didn't have the capacity to consider me. And I got in that moment that I could consider her. Like, that's evolution. There's a piece in which we so think and get upset with our mothers because they don't know what we know. And we think something's wrong, instead of, no, we're supposed to grow past our mothers. That is evolution. It doesn't mean something's wrong. They've laid the groundwork so that we could do the next layer. But we have forgotten in this culture about the idea of cathedral building, that people would start and lay their piece down, knowing they would never, ever be able to touch or see the completion. And that's our journeys. I expect my children to grow past me, because that's evolution.
And healing.
Yes. And what it means to be interdependent.
And what it means to be interdependent.
So I take her with me now. She's no longer on this earth plane, but there's things that I get to do that she didn't. Right. And I can carry her with me. And there's often this myth here too, in our culture too, where so many people who come in the fire and water journey, white people will talk about how they don't have access to their ancestral, like they're not connected to their ancestors. And someone said something recently that had me think about this totally different. And he said, yes, we do. We've just called them founders. So, so the ancestor connection, the founding fathers, the founders of these corporations are always usually these white men, right? We've called them founders because if we use that language, we don't have to consider other people's ancestors.
Whoa. Okay, wait, let's wrap our heads around this. We've called our ancestors founders.
Yes. The founding fathers.
Uh-huh.
Or
Yeah.
even business, the founders, that's who had access to those things often.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Well, when I think maybe an issue, I don't know. For me, it's mutts. We're mutts. So in terms of ancestry, I have to look at Russia, Czechoslovakia, Italy, where else? Or two parts of Italy, Sicily and Naples, right? So it's like it starts to become this blur and this mix of, yeah, truly where am I coming from? And then we all came to America, right? And we're not actually rooted here. It's just what, 2 generations for me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But what
yeah,
makes us think that other people aren't that too? It's so interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
we all have that. And so I was stuck with the question too, like how do, you know, initiation typically has been culturally specific. And here in the US, how do you do a culturally specific diverse initiation? And so actually what we've done is
Yes.
each person gets access to their ancestral DNA when they come into the program. And they can do it if they want, and they can choose then which lineage they want to dive down deeper into while we're in the program. And we do it side by side. So you don't have to we don't have to do it all at once. We can do one line that we want to connect to, that ancestry in that moment, that gives us more access to ourselves.
Thank you for that. That's brilliant.
Mm.
Like that just opened up so much for me of like, wow, yeah, what would that look like if I just went down
Yeah.
grandmother's line,
Yes.
right? Because
Yeah.
that's rooted in Sicily for
Yeah.
me. And
Yeah.
that goes really deep down that line.
Yes. Yes.
Wow, that just opened up so much. Thank you for that.
Welcome.
Really
We just have
powerful.
to pick one piece and go, right? And then it starts to show up for us in ways because the unseen world wants to meet us too. And so when we start, right, it meets us and things start showing up. Or I remember one night I was just upset with spirit. And I'm really like yelling at the ancestors because, that's part of what I do. And so I was, just basically saying, if you want me to do this, you need to show the hell up. I mean, like really, right? And then that next morning I had a call with a friend of mine, a woman, Shanae from South Africa, and I was just so weepy that morning. And she asked me what, and I said, I don't know why I'm still so weepy. And then I get off the phone with her, and there's a message for me on my Nazuzu Facebook page. And it's a guy who reached out. He says, I don't know how often you check your ancestry.com, but I believe that we're connected in ancestors. Like we're, I forget, second or third cousins or whatever. And he says, if you want to know more, here's my contact, reach out. And so I said, yes, please call me. So he called me that day and he shared with me the story about 3 of my ancestors who fought in the Civil War, who came back 2 of them came out of freedom to fight. And another ancestor who was part of the Underground Railroad. And and I said to him at the end of the call, oh my goodness, like you're such an answered prayer. Like I was yelling for the ancestors to show up. And here you are the next day. Right? And so they will come and find you.
Wow. Thank you for that. Again, oh my gosh. I don't ever want this to end. Okay, so oh my gosh, I feel like we've just covered so much territory. And you are launching your program on the Evolving Sisters Network with our dear sister, Ken Lynn. Why don't
Yes.
you tell us a little bit about how that's come into play here, and what that's about, and give the women, we'll add the link to the show notes, but
Yeah.
just let's share about what this is all about.
Okay, so first we're doing a little kind of taster, I always say, and it's a free event. It happens on Tuesday, August 22nd, from noon to 1 Pacific time, and it's about discovering the 3 stages of healing your deepest feminine wound. And it's looking at just the different layers. There's 3 different layers of growth and development that we talk about, that the wound lives in, and that the healing does too. One of the things that I believe is we have to do this work in community. Sabong Fu Somei said that the wound happens in community, so the healing has to happen there too. And so part of this conversation is, what are those 3 different layers? And that's to open up for, we're doing a series, it's 4 gatherings in September around, actually it's the healing the mother wound, but it comes from this work that I'm doing right now of working on this book called Birthed by Many Mothers. And it's the idea that, the mothers in the community help birth us, and that it's not about when our mothers don't have, well, I'll change that a little bit, but when we think our mothers don't have what we need, then other people will show up. Even though the reason I kind of stopped and tripped over that a little bit is I remember there was a moment where my father was coming to visit, and I was in the bathroom mirror giving myself the pep talk. Okay, he doesn't have all that you need, but you can, responsibility is always on the one most healed. Just accept what he has and let him show up and let him be present. And what Spirit said to me in that moment is, maybe this isn't about what he has to give, but what you need for who you're to be here on this earth plane. And I never considered that my dad's inability wasn't about his lack, but about what I needed to step into me. And so how do I let go of the story that I thought he was showing up for me for, to open to learn who he really is in my life? Because I think that we think we get to decide, instead of our job is to discover each moment, who are we now? And that so that piece around this mother journey, and learning about what are the stories we carry around our mother, and our mother wound, and our mother gifts. It's not just the wounds, right? And is the story we carry a story we want to keep? Or are we ready to step into a new story? And how do you do that? And what does that mean? And who are the people who have mothered us in our life? And how does that story affect our own mothering? So all of those different things to kind of journey together with.
Beautiful. Okay, so we'll add those links into the show notes here. So yeah, as we wrap up here, I'd love to hear from you. What does it mean to be a brave woman today?
So I love that question. And what I would say is, there's and I just got finished speaking this to a group earlier today, is I was talking with a friend about the word courage. And she said for the first time she looked at the word courage and saw the word rage, and really realized that every courageous act had a bit of rage in it. And what that took me to is, Robert Bly wrote a book called Iron John, and he talks about how anger is personal, rage is archetypal, it's communal. And so I wondered if that, by definition, courage is communal. And then if you look at the front part of courage, the core, it's heart, right? Heart rage. And so James Hillman wrote this piece about the 3 different philosophies of the heart. And he talks about how there's the blood pumping, the physical heart. There's the passionate heart, what pulls us from the inside out. And there's the essence of something, the heart of the matter, right? And so I started to wonder, what if when we choose and act courageous, what we're really doing is stepping out of a personal fear and honoring a collective truth? What if we really got that courage was collective, courage was communal, it wasn't personal? And that by doing that, we then honor all 3 philosophies of the heart. We heal our physical heart. We honor what we're passionate about, and honor the essence of who we are.
Oh, wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What a
Thank you.
phenomenal conversation we had today.
Mm.
Honoring you, sister, and the work that you're doing and all of who you are. Thank you. Thank you for writing that book. I can't wait to get my hands on it.
Thank you. I think, it kind of wrote me, but that's a whole different conversation.
I know. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you, sisters, for tuning in to the Brave Woman podcast, and we will see you soon. You just listened to this show. I'd love for you to leave the Brave Woman podcast an honest review. Reviews help podcasts like this one grow, making it more possible for me to devote my time, energy, and money to its production. If you take a screenshot of your review and email it to support@sistershipcircle.com, we'll send you one of our archetype activations as a thank you gift. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Up next, what does it feel like to live in alignment, in rhythm with your body's natural cycle, the way of your ancestors, and the earth? That's what we're diving into in the next episode with Jamie Wiggins, the beautiful poet that you heard from earlier.